Okay, well, hello everyone who is online, and thank you everyone for joining us in person here. I'm Aidan McCrae, Marketing Coordinator at YukonU INE. Just standing in right now for our wonderful manager, Caitlin McMaster, who's a bit under the weather. So we're just so thrilled that Chin can join us all the way from Vancouver today. And before we dive into Chin's workshop, I want to acknowledge that we have the honor to live, work, and play and learn together on the beautiful land of the Kwanlin First Nation and the Talan Council. I also want to thank the Whitehorse Chamber of Commerce for presenting Small Business Week. It's the first year that they have combined Yukoners Appreciation Week with Small Business Week, so it's been a lot of fun so far. We had a full day of events here in the classroom yesterday. We have Chin's workshop. We also have business after hours starting at 5 until 8 this evening, where you can book one-to-one sessions with experts like Chin. So take a look at that at whitehorsechamber.ca if you want to book a session to learn more about your business and get tailored advice. We also want to thank Kilrich, BDC, and of course TechYukon for delivering Small Business Week. What else? Welcome, Benoit. And again, we just want to thank Chin for coming all this way to deliver this workshop. We've really been counting down to it, and thank you for generously bringing some copies of your book to share with the participants. And I will just quickly go over the norms for both online and in person. So we are on Zoom. We are going to record this session to make sure that we have a copy for folks who couldn't attend. We will be pressing record soon, and we'll be editing as needed. So just be aware that that's happening. And if you're online, if you could please mute yourself just for the next while. If you have a question or concern, feel free to raise your hand. Heather is moderating in the chat. You can drop a chat or a question in there, but also please feel free, don't be shy. If there's something you really need, like you can't hear us or you're having an issue, just feel free to interrupt us and we'll get you sorted. Otherwise, just please hold your questions until a break or until Chin is ready for to take your questions. Well, with that, I will pass over to Chin in just a moment. Yes, thank you, Chin, and have fun. And we will touch base again in a little bit.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I think a lot of familiar faces in the crowd and also some people online as well. So quickly for today, a few things. What I'd like to encourage people who I'm speaking with, a few things in terms of code of conduct. So number one is if you hear me saying something inappropriate, don't be afraid to just cut in or tell me that I'm saying something that's inappropriate as well. Also, I don't like to position myself as like the guru or the expert. So if anyone else has like interesting examples, ideas, or if you want to debate some of my points, feel free to cut in as well. And yeah, if you have your own insights, if you have your own examples, if you find that certain things work better for you in certain kind of cases or examples, feel free to share that with the crowd. So today's workshop is brought to you by INE from Yukon University and also on behalf of TechYukon. Like many of you, I also wear many hats. I am the program manager at TechYukon. So I manage our Canada Digital Adoption Program. So that's a grant program that we run that gives some funding to local businesses here in Whitehorse and throughout Yukon to help with building some sort of online presence for your business. So be e-commerce, or maybe if you're a hotel or a restaurant looking to build up your first website, that's where our funding comes in. That grant program is unfortunately already closed, so we really fully subscribe for it. And we have another program that we also run, which is an IP program that we helped, and both Dio and Leap were here yesterday. So that's where we bring in experts, we help train local entrepreneurs to help them understand what are patents, what are trademarks, what are copyrights, how do you use that to protect your business. So we have some funding there as well. So if you do decide that you maybe want to explore patenting or registering a trademark, you need some funding to engage with a lawyer or law firm, then you can speak to me about that as well. To kind of give you some background, kind of where did I go and how did I end up doing what I do and why is this book here? I started my career in sales back in 2011. And when I started in 2011, I was in corporate sales. So I used to work for Bell. And then after that, I worked for Freedom Mobile back in the days when they were called Win Mobile. And what I found in a lot of corporate sales training is there's a lot of good information there that helps you understand like how do you interact with people, how do you speak persuasively, how do you build relationships. But what I often found is that a lot of those insights and tips and techniques can somewhat be a bit manipulative if you use it in the wrong context, if you don't use it the right way with the right intentions. So that didn't really sit well with me. I ended up moving into the startup role back in 2014 because I wanted to build my own business. And from there, I ended up working for a social venture incubator accelerator down in Vancouver called Spring. So these, if you're not familiar with a social venture or social enterprise, these are companies that are for profit, but with the mission of doing some form of good for the world. So be it for environment, mental health, community, those kind of things. So what I found there was both the side of people wanting to do good, but also people at the same time wanting to profit as well. And what I found is a lot of these social ventures or founders who run these social ventures, they did not really like the idea of selling, but they understood the importance of making money for their business. So naturally, they really struggle with the concept of how do I get sustainable revenue for my business. Some of them would depend more on funding and grants. So they would operate like a non-profit, although they were for-profit. And I thought, maybe it's time for me to put together something that would give them some sort of framework around that. So that's kind of where the book came. So a few key things that I want to share before I even get into the beef of the topic today. And I think this is quite relevant because if you are like me, I'm the kind of person who likes to learn a lot. So I call myself like a lifelong learner. The challenge that I have with learning is sometimes there's so much content to learn, so much out there, and you don't really know how to apply it. So a few things is, number one is make sure that when you're thinking about what you want to implement in your business or even in your day-to-day life, or maybe even personally, not even for the business, you want to make sure that whatever you absorb, whatever concepts you take, you're also considering how it's going to impact you, not only short-term, but also long-term. And I think this is especially important in sales because oftentimes people will forego, if they take more traditional sales training, they will focus more on the short-term results. Yes, close the sale today, but if you don't build a good relationship with your customer or client, then that can actually damage your business or your reputation in the long run. The second one is customize things. There's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all. I would love to be able to give you a magic pill and say, this is exactly how you sell. But everyone has a different product, a different solution, different context, different customer. So try to take what you see here as more of a guideline and apply it in your own context. If you have questions about like, hey, I have this kind of business, I don't think this applies to me, we can chat about that. Don't boil the ocean. So there's a lot of information that I'll be sharing. So I actually have, I think, 92 slides, and I'll try to cover all that in 2 hours. So I will be speaking quite quickly. If you miss any points, feel free to get me to repeat myself. And what I encourage you to do is, if anything, think about what small things you can start to apply right away. You don't have to apply everything, but the more you can actually use, the better. Which takes me to the next point. My favorite practice nowadays is to apply what I call just-in-time learning. So what I try to do is, there's so much to learn out there, both topic-wise, but also techniques and different methodologies. I try to only pick up things that I can use right away. Both because it helps improve retention, because you're applying it in real life, but also because you get immediate value, immediate results. So think about, what do I need to do today? What do I want to actually apply? Instead of just saying, oh, I think fundraising could be interesting. I think marketing could be interesting. And then you find yourself just consuming so much content and not taking action. So a few key things we will try to accomplish today. Number one, I will show you some tips around understanding how to build that initial connection with your customer, prospect, investor, what have you be. Number two, we will go into understanding how to assess their interests, their needs, their wants. we'll go into how to present your solution or whatever offering you have. And you have to remember, sales is about persuasion. So it applies not only to selling physical products, but also, let's say, if you're trying to find a mentor, or if you're trying to find an investor, you are selling yourself, you're pitching your business, you're pitching the potential of that investor making money as well, right? And then how to identify if someone's ready to move on to that next step, be it the purchase or be it entering into a formal agreement with you. And then how do you actually close the customer? And then from there, what comes after? And I think a lot of people miss this step as well. So how do you set good expectations? How do you keep them happy? For those of you online, I can share a link with you after the talk. And you have the online version of my book, which is the full website, and that's available free. If you are here in person, you get the book for free as well. And like Dio was asking me yesterday, why are you not selling your book? My book is more of a marketing tool. So for me, if people want to work in more intense manner, if they want me to build a program for them, if they want me to do more hands-on training, then that's where that's quote unquote the upside, right? But yeah, I think really sales starts with mindset. Sorry, that's my sense. But mindset is the biggest part, because no matter what, even if I give you tips, techniques, frameworks, methodologies, if you don't like the idea of selling, and I'm not saying you should like the idea of selling. I am an introvert myself, and I loathe selling. And I feel uncomfortable when it comes to the kind of situation where I have to pitch something to someone. But if you have the wrong mindset, and if you think that you are out there because you need to pitch something to someone, then you're starting on the wrong foot, right? You need to change your mindset in terms of how you're thinking about sales, and it's more about seeing yourself as helping someone get something they need. So we'll go into some key mindset shifts in a second. The first one is, the biggest one I think, is really focusing on what they want, what the person you're speaking to wants, not what you want. Because in every interaction that you have with a customer, usually in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, I want to get this investor interested in my business, or I want to get this customer to buy my product or service. And if you are thinking from your perspective, you will not be able to have that conversation in a way where you're actually giving genuine help and benefit to the person. So you need to always come from their perspective, not only on the macro level, but even on the micro level. So as you go into techniques, for example, first technique that I will talk about is how do you build that initial connection with someone? How do you build trust? And if you focus on the element like, I need to build trust because I'm just connecting with this person for the first time, and if you focus too much on like, I need to build rapport, I need to build trust, then you are again not focusing on the customer. You build trust to make them feel comfortable, right? So you need to focus again, how am I going to make this person comfortable? And if you prioritize them, everything else will flow a lot more naturally. One great saying that a mentor taught me is, profit is not the purpose. So you go out there, you build a business. Yes, you want to make money, but don't let profit be your purpose. Because if you set up with profit as the purpose, you will find ways to achieve profit that may not align with your own values or your own ethos. So profit is the result of doing something great. Right? You want to do something great. You want to build, change the world, create an amazing product. Profit will come as a result, not the purpose. And lastly, like if you just aim on leaving them better than when you found them, then you would have done a good job. They don't necessarily have to buy from you from every interaction. As long as you help them, add value to them, then that will come back to you in many different ways. Not only from them maybe purchasing at a later date, but maybe even giving you referrals or even giving you a good review as well. So that was number one, focusing on the customer, focusing on who you're speaking to. Number two is the biggest one that I find a lot of people feel uncomfortable about, is what is being authentic in selling. And what I found is, or at least what I've learned over the years, is a lot of people have the impression that when you are working in a sales related role or customer service role, you have a different face that you put on when you're speaking to your customers versus the face that you have when you're speaking with your friends or at home, right? And I think that the challenge there is some people think that that face or facade that they have when they're interacting with different people is inauthentic. And the way I like to get you to think of it is, if you're at home, if you're speaking with your parents or your grandparents, versus when you're hanging out with your friends, there are certain things that you would or would not say to your parents that you might be more comfortable saying to your friends. Right? Maybe you might make fart jokes with your friends, and maybe you wouldn't do that in front of your grandma. Or maybe you would, which is really cool if you could. But the idea there is being inauthentic is not so much about how you behave with different people, but instead it's more about whether or not what you do aligns with your values. And I can talk more about values in a second, but what I find is at the end of the day, your values is kind of your ethos. It's kind of what determines what you feel is right versus wrong. And when you adjust to a client, if you, let's say, in some sales training, they say if someone is analytical, if they come in knowing exactly what they want, then you should mold to them, right? You should just give them the answers they want. You don't have to, let's say, focus on small talk and building the relationship. And that's totally fine. Because at the end of the day, it's about how do you make that customer feel as comfortable as possible. And as long as you're doing things that align with your own set of values, then the different behavior that you have with them, then that's not, make sense? So if, however, there are certain things that you come across where you feel like that's not, then my encouragement is don't do that, okay? So at the end of the day, you want to be yourself, because if you are trying to force yourself to be someone that you're not, then customers will be able to smell that from along. And yeah. The third one is what I find as well is out there, there's a lot of good sales training and techniques. Some of what I share will be actually built on that. And the common kind of pushback that I get from a lot of people are traditional techniques work. Why do I need to sell in a different way? Right? Is selling ethically actually better for my business, or is that going to mean that I will have slower conversion, have less customers convert? I disagree with the statement. I feel that yes, there's a lot of good techniques, a lot of methods out there, but what you often don't see in what they talk about is some of them focus too much on the short-term piece. And it's really not worth sacrificing a lot of that long-term value that you get from the business. And I can personally say like a lot of the business that I've had in the past come from long-term referrals that I get from other clients as well. And it's a lot harder to measure and track some of these things. So if you look at a regular business reporting, typically all of your goals and KPIs, revenue targets, all of that is all measured on like weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. But sometimes you might get a referral like 2 years down the road from someone that really likes you, really trusts you, right? So it's really hard to track some of these pieces, but don't discount them. So the last and final piece when it comes to mindset is I want to encourage you to adopt what we call a challenger mindset. So this actually comes from an entire book called The Challenger Sales Framework. I won't go into it in too much detail, but the idea here is not so much about challenging to push someone to buy, but what you find is in sales, there are two main types of sales approaches. One is what they call the relationship builder. As a relationship builder, you're focused on getting accepted by that person. You're focused on being liked by the other party. And yes, it's important to be accepted, to be liked, but if you focus too much on that, then you're not really standing on the interest of your client. Because in some cases, you may interact with a client, and I'll say maybe client or prospect or customer, but they all mean the same thing. And sometimes they may come to you, or you may come across someone, and you know what is best for them, but they may resist it. Maybe because they're not exposed to something new yet. Maybe they are not aware of their problem yet. And in some cases, you may have to either educate them, or maybe you have to challenge their train of thought, their misconceptions. And the idea is you want to not only focus on the relationship, but you'll also want to be able to stand for your customer if you know that there's something that is more beneficial for them. And don't be afraid to push back and have some debate there, right? So kindness versus niceness, I think, is a concept that really applies very well to the challenger mindset. What I find is most of us like to be nice. And nice is conflict avoidance. You be nice because you feel uncomfortable if you say something that someone doesn't like, right? But to be kind, you need to take it a step further. To be kind, you need to be able to stand for what is more important for your customer and even challenge them, even if it makes them uncomfortable as well. So for example, one personal example is I used to have a coworker who had very terrible body odor. and I would not bring it up with her because I was worried, like, it might be rude to say something like that. But in retrospect now, if I was to be kind, I would have actually brought it up and actually make her aware of it because it would affect her reputation on other people as well. Another example is, let's say if you have to reject someone. If you reject someone, usually a lot of people, they just say, they come up with excuses because they use those excuses to avoid the conflict. And if you are taking a step further and you want to be kind, you want to give what I call supportive no's. So what that means is, let's say, for example, if I'm an investor and you want to pitch your business to me, you want to raise some money from me, what an investor who is nice might say, cool, sounds good, send me an email, I'll get back to you. So that's kind of a nice response. If you want to be kind, you might say, that's really interesting, but the reason why I won't invest in you today is because I have questions about this, this, and that. Or I don't think you're ready because of X, Y, and Z. So if you come back to me and you finish or you're able to prove these points, I might become interested, right? So you need to take it a step further and show them how to get to that yes in some cases. So yeah, this is a great quote I like from Winnie Cummings. If you're not really exposing people to the truth, you're not giving them the dignity of their own experience and assuming that they can't handle it. That said, don't confuse being kind with being uncouth. You don't just want to say random stuff at people, take it or leave it, and assume that you've done your job and you're doing a good part in kind of giving truthful value to them. But you need to also be mindful of how to give them feedback in a way that actually is digestible by them. So for example, if you're a sales leader, if you're a manager, maybe you might see someone pushing a customer to buy a product and you think that he's being too pushy in their sales approach. If you just come across and say, hey, you are too aggressive with this person, maybe they may not take that feedback well. So you might want to also consider, why are they doing the things that they're doing? What is the approach that they have, and how can you give the feedback in such a way that they will actually be able to digest it and also want to make the change that you're suggesting, right? At the end of the day, this is the ultimate irony. Good salespeople don't sell. So a lot of the things that we will be talking about today is about more guiding the customer to understand how your solution will solve their problem. It's less about pitching the product. So this is the framework that I have in my book that you can read. So it stands for C.A.R.E is connect, assess, respond, and engage. And we'll go through each of them in some detail. So connect is basically your first step, your first interaction with the customer. The way I like you to see this framework is, this is a kind of a guidepost for you to help you understand where you are in the interaction. And I find this helpful because most people feel uncomfortable with selling because they feel it's too ambiguous. They don't know what I should do next. And they worry too much about, like, now I'm speaking to this customer, what should I say next? What should I say next? And then they don't focus on being present in the conversation. So having this framework helps you understand, like, okay, we've done this. This is the next step that we can move on. So connect piece is, in every interaction, usually there is a first point of contact. This first point of contact may or may not be in person, right? It could be, if you are cold calling, maybe that's the first phone call. If you are, if you have a website, maybe someone coming onto your website, that's your connection point. So how do you communicate or accomplish some of the things that you need to do in Connect? The good news is, in the initial touch point, it's actually very, very simple. You just need to do two things. In connecting with someone, you need to, number one, be likable, and number two, build trust. So likability is just getting that person to welcome you, because ultimately, even if you have a great product, if people don't like you, they will not buy from you. And then second is, they need to trust you as well. Both trust you now, but also trust you long term, especially if you have something new. Because if you are, let's say, a startup, if you're running a new business, then people will wonder, like, will you still be around 5 years from now? And if I'm going to give you all my data, if I'm going to work with you, maybe all that's going to disappear, right? So how do you be likable? How do you build trust? There's a lot of things I go through in my book, so I might be skipping over some things. The first one that I want to focus on is being present and being intentional. This is very, very powerful. The reason why I talk about this is when I went through sales training, one of the things that they teach you in how to build rapport with a customer is they teach you about what they call finding common ground. So finding common ground means when you're speaking with someone, you need to figure out what the other person does or is interested in that you also share similar experience or interest in. And when you bring that up, then it helps build rapport because there's some relatability. But what I find is when people hear this, they take it the wrong way. And then they end up in situations where they make up fake situations where like, oh, someone mentioned they like Thai food. Oh, yes, I like Thai food too. And it's like that fake common ground just to build rapport. But instead of doing that, if you are focused on being mindful and you know what you're listening for, then it makes it a lot easier for you to get to that common ground. So be present, focus on your customers, and you need to know how you want to ask the right questions to get the right answers. Another tip I want to share is understanding how to empathize with someone. The strongest point that I find is common ground is a bit overrated because when you meet someone that comes from a completely different background, different experience, different age range, demographic, it's really hard to find that commonality. But one easy thing is we are all human. And what do we all share as humans? We all have emotions. So the best thing that you can do to build that bridge with someone else is find the commonality in the emotions that you share. And sometimes it may be around the frustration that your solution solves for, or maybe it's just listening to them. And when you're present, you understand why they're frustrated. You can relate to that frustration, and that's where you build empathy with them. Right? So I won't go into too much detail. Again, the book goes into some of that. But oh yeah, one example I can give is a friend of mine, when he was on a flight, I think from Singapore back to Vancouver, he was sat beside the vice president of Universal Studios Singapore. And at the time he was a student. So he was like, okay, how do I talk to this person? How do I kind of have a conversation? And he found that that's where the emotional piece came in. Because completely different background, completely different experience. One person's a student managing a student club. Another one's a vice president of a company with a huge team. And what he was able to bond over with was the frustration that that person had with managing a team. So he was also kind of sharing about his frustrations managing the student team as well for his student club. So that if you focus on the emotions, then the experiences become a lot less relevant. On the trust side of the picture then, you have the common ones where it's more about like, showcasing your testimonials, your credentials. But what a lot of people don't pay enough attention to is kind of communicating your passion for whatever you do. And this is hard. This is not easy, especially if you are in a situation where, I mean, hopefully you have a passion for your business. If you don't, then you're in the wrong space. But if you've hired someone and they lack the passion, it's almost impossible to instill passion into someone, even if they have all the skills. So this is why I always recommend that when you hire salespeople, they need to first and foremost be excited about your product. The skills you can always train, but you can't instill passion in someone. So the passion piece is like communicate why you are in this space, why you're doing what you're doing, not only with the technology, but also in the industry or the topic itself. And that kind of communicates that you like what you do, you know what you're doing. Because people don't only want to work with experts, they want to work with people who are in the space because they like it. Social proof is the obvious one, but the social proof piece, the one thing you want to be careful about is you don't use social proof to manipulate someone and say that, hey, look, everyone is signing up for this program, therefore you should sign up for it, kind of thing. The social proof piece here is more about what I find that a lot of people struggle with is how do you communicate something without bragging. And the challenge there is when you are the person and you have a great product and you say, oh, my product is great, or oh, my widget does X, Y, and Z and delivers all these results, it's naturally the person on the other side will be skeptical and they are defensive because they expect you to be promoting your own product. And the social proof piece is when you have a good product, but you find it challenging to actually pitch and kind of position all those good values. The best thing that you can do is let other people speak on your behalf. So this is where you highlight the kind of important information, not just general ratings and reviews, but if there is useful information there that actually highlights your features, your products, your credentials, that's where you want to kind of highlight or float those reviews to the top. So these are some of my own reviews from our website. Oh, sorry, but some other examples like TripAdvisor reviews for a restaurant, for example. And the last thing is I also encourage you to be vulnerable in how you interact. And a lot of people find this uncomfortable because they feel that, oh, if I have to share some of my challenges, some of my problems, won't that make the person uncomfortable with me? At the end of the day, people want to know that they're interacting with humans, not robots, especially now with AI as well and how everything is getting automated. If you're having a bad day, don't force that. So for example, if you're interacting with someone and maybe your son just failed his math exam and you're really frustrated, it's okay to put that on the table and say sorry, I'm a bit distracted today. Here's the situation. I'm not asking you to dump all your problems on your prospect, but just tell them how you're feeling, and then you can move on to the next step so that they know where you're coming from as well. One example of being vulnerable too is sharing your flaws, both not only personally, but with your solutions as well. And there's a great example from a podcast. So it's the Empire Builders podcast. So they talk a bit about this car dealership. Sorry, not car dealership, RV dealership. And I think it's based in Edmonton. And they were trying to sell some of the old RVs that they had. And one of the RV units that they had was owned by a marijuana smoker. So it was kind of infused with the smell. You can't get it out. And when they were trying to not talk about that and just pitch the RV itself, then every time they had someone come and be interested, they would end up not buying because once you smell it, you don't like it, right? But when they actually said, hey, this RV was owned by a previous marijuana smoker, if you're a marijuana smoker and you don't mind the smoke, this is for you. Then it's sold really quickly. So don't be afraid to be vulnerable and just disclose things. So what you can do as an exercise, we have time. Do you want to do exercise? Yeah, I think we can maybe take 5 minutes here. So this is more of a reflection exercise. So think about what are some of the things that you can communicate, both about yourself, but also about your business as well, that will highlight your credibility and also the credibility of your business as well. There's a lot more to cover, so maybe I'll leave this exercise with you to kind of reflect on your own time. It's all in the book as well. There's a lot of exercises in the book. So the second step now that you've kind of built that initial connection, and when I say initial connection, I also want you to remember that this happens in every interaction. It's not just you connect with the person, done, you step back and you do whatever you want. Every time you're meeting with that person, you're connecting with them. Right? The second step then is what we call assess. Assess here is where you try to understand what they need, what they're interested in. So now you're shifting gears, you're moving more to those questions that aren't focused so much on uncovering kind of common interests, common ground, those kind of things, but more about asking questions so that you know how you can talk about your solution to this person. And at the end of the day, it's more about how can you help them, right? So two main things. One is you need to do your homework. And I can't emphasize this enough. I think some people feel that when they prepare for a conversation, they feel that it becomes inauthentic because it's scripted. I'm not asking you to go into a conversation with a script, but you need to do your research because the more you know about someone that you're speaking to, the less questions you have to ask them. And it makes the conversation a lot more natural. So take the time to get to know the person that you're speaking with. It makes you a lot more comfortable with them, but it also makes them more comfortable with you because they don't have to share and talk on and on about everything. So here's where you start to ask those relevant questions. So under questioning, one tip that I want to share is when I was in sales training, they would encourage me to think about what questions can you ask to position your features of your product or service. I don't really like that. So this example here is kind of what you would do that. You might say, how do you use your phone to take pictures? And then you're doing that because you're thinking, I want to pitch this feature in the phone where it's low light photography or that special feature where it takes a motion photo a few seconds before. Or you might say, oh, what do you like to photograph? Or you might ask like, how do you capture those moments during swap matches, those kind of things. Instead of those feature-oriented questions, my encouragement is to ask more what I call lifestyle questions. So when you're asking lifestyle questions, again, it's still, you're not asking general lifestyle questions, but you're asking lifestyle questions related to your solution. Right? So let's say in Allison's case, you talk about therapy. So you might ask them, let's say, about kind of disagreements that they generally have in a household, for example. What gets you frustrated? So instead of focusing too much on like the exact specific things, like, oh, where do you feel pain? It's more about like, what is the kind of situation and the context in which you feel pain. So when you ask those kind of lifestyle questions, then you tend to be able to come up with not only ways to position your solution, but you also get to think outside of the box. And you might be like, oh, you know what? They mentioned that. Now I can see some other thing that I have that might also help them. So, for example, if I'm pitching this same motion photo feature on my camera, if I find out that someone has kids, then I can pitch in a very different way. So an example over here might be, oh, if you have kids, let me show you this really cool feature in the phone. Like when I go out for events, when I attend family gatherings, I often need to photograph the kids playing around or the family picture. And what I find is normally, kids, they're moving around all the time. It's really hard to get them to look at the camera. So it's really hard to get the perfect photo. And what you see is this phone has this motion photo feature. So if you notice here, I'm not leading the presentation. I'm not leading the pitch by talking about the feature first. I'm leading the conversation by saying, I'm acknowledging first that they say they have this need. And then after that, I'm saying, oh, this is the context within that for that need. I'm also building some relatability. I'm showing them that I also have that kind of problem. I mean, again, you're not doing this with a false veneer. If you don't have this problem, don't put it there. But if you have experienced it before, then yes, you can share it. And then you go to the feature itself. And then again, you want to tie the feature back to the benefit itself. So don't just say, hey, this is the amazing feature of the phone. So you might say, by having this feature, it enables you to review the image like a few seconds before and after so that you get the kind of perfect moment in case someone's blinking or looked away or something like that. And then because they mentioned they have kids, then you can maybe also think about something else that you might present to them. Like, oh, kids, they like to get their dirty hands on your phone. Like this phone is waterproof. You can just rinse it, wash it. You don't have to worry about it getting broken, right? So the idea there is if you ask those bigger picture lifestyle questions, then you can think more about other things that you can present. Another strong thing that you can do is to quantify value. This is going to be a bit harder depending on the product or service that you sell. But what I encourage you to do is when you think about engaging with a customer, ideally your solution will be able to add some value to them. And what I mean by value is maybe it's going to help them save time, make their life better, make them more comfortable, help them make more money, help them save money, what have you. So you need to understand and benchmark where they are before versus after. Because then if you've quantified value during the assessment stage, when you come to closing your customer and then even after as well, when you engage with them kind of post customer service, you can show them that, yes, we have actually been able to add value. And if you haven't been able, then maybe you're selling the wrong product. But this helps reinforce the idea and helps them see that whatever you are offering to them is actually benefiting them. So think about how can you quantify that value? Like what is their current state? How can you measure them? So you may want to ask some of those questions when you're assessing them as well. So for example, what would solving this problem do for you, right? Or tell me about how much you spend on X, Y, and Z right now, or how much time does it take you to do this and that, right? So asking those kind of questions there helps you understand where they are right now, and that's where you benchmark. As you are assessing, one thing that a lot of sales training will encourage you to do is do what they call active listening. What I find is a bit vague is the active listening part is like what exactly is active listening? First piece obviously is you don't want to spend too much time pitching yet. You're not getting to your product, so spend more of your time listening. On the active listening point, it's you want to be able to really be present instead of focusing on the next point. And what I mean there is oftentimes we tend to listen with the intent of responding. That means we're listening because we're like, okay, that person said this, what should I say next? Or what should come after that? What question should I ask next? And when you do that, you're not paying attention to the person. So one tip that I really encourage is not focusing on the replying piece, but really focusing on really understanding them. And one thing that you can do that will really help you is do some note taking. It's really under practice nowadays in sales. Like just have pen and paper or have a computer, laptop, phone, whatever you have. But you can obviously let the person that you are speaking with know that you're taking notes, because it shows them that you're, and not so much about having that impression that you're listening to them, but it really allows you to be present, because you can jot things down and just focus on the conversation as opposed to, I need to remember everything they say. Right? So, another exercise that you can do, we'll skip over this again, is just list down some questions that you can ask that will help you uncover your prospect's needs. So what do they need? What do they want? And we'll talk about the difference between need and want in a second. But maybe I'll pause you quickly. Any questions about like assessing?
How deep do you want to go with these questions? I mean, ultimately, like my clients want peace. They want staying. They want to be able to communicate. They want to be able to have more emotional resiliency so that they can do that.
I would say how deep depends on how much you need in order to give them a good assessment. So if you don't need to get into too much detail, like you don't need to know their income level, then wouldn't ask that kind of question. So don't ask for questions that are not relevant. Focus on what you just need at the immediate moment, or even at that stage of the conversation. Because I think a lot of people also confuse selling as a single interaction. It's not a one-off kind of thing. Sometimes the sales process might actually take a few weeks or even months, or maybe a few different interactions, like an email, a phone call, what have you. So you may not have to do everything in one single interaction. I mean, even in your context of cleaning, I can imagine like maybe before they come in, they might fill out a survey, and then maybe when they're in there, you might ask them a few questions in person. So like those are the questions. So moving on. So assuming that now you kind of have enough information to engage with the person and kind of talk about what you have, you obviously don't want to start the conversation by pitching. That's why this only comes after you assess their needs. One good way to transition is to start by opening up and acknowledging what they've shared with you. Because number one, it helps them see that you're listening. Number two, it helps clarify any assumptions that you might have. What I often find is a lot of salespeople tend to have confirmation bias. Familiar with that basically is the idea that you tend to listen and hear the things that you want to listen and hear. So be careful about that, because sometimes that's not what the customer actually cares about. And when you repeat that back to them, they might be, oh, wait, you mentioned that. Yes, I did say that, but actually I care more about something. Right? So you want to just reaffirm whatever you've heard with your customer or prospect, because maybe they actually want something else. That's the saying, the example in sales is don't sell them the drill, sell them the hole. And this ties back to the idea of like sell them what they want versus giving them what they need. In that classic sales example, they need the drill, but customers don't want the drill, right? They want the hole. And the difference between need versus want is they both sound very similar, but they mean very different things to a prospect. So I'll give you one very powerful example. So a good friend of mine, his mom had a heart attack. And when you go to a doctor, what does the doctor do? Doctor prescribes. Doctor says, oh, you need to take this medicine, you need to exercise more, you need to improve your diet. But prescription is what they need. It's not what they want. And if you give a customer what they need, they don't really listen. And then his mom actually had another episode because that was the approach. And so he said, like, my friend was actually sharing with me, if the doctor was actually more focused on like, oh, you want to spend more time with your grandkids, you need to do these kind of things, then she might have probably paid more attention and kind of acted more immediately. So that's kind of the power between what they want and what they need. So you need to understand what the customers really care about. And oftentimes when you have your solution, that is what they want, but it's not what they, sorry, that's what they need, but it's not really what they want. So you need to uncover what is the hidden motivation behind that. What is their why? Why are they using your solution? What does it enable them to do or become? So I'll play this video, and folks online, let me know if you can't hear the audio.
Hello. Bonjour.
Très très mignon. Allô?
Le commandant et toute son équipe espèrent que vous avez passé un agréable.
So if you notice in that video, like Google is actually showing a lot of their features, but they don't start by pitching the features. They're not saying like, hey, look, you can use Google to translate. You can use Google to find out information. You can use Google to book a flight. It's actually telling a story about the customer, right? And when you do it that way, that's how you highlight kind of the want of the customer. Customer doesn't want booking a flight. Customer wants to go to Paris because they want to meet the person of their dreams, right? So what is the customer want? And it applies not only in sales, as you can see, but also in marketing as well. And again, like sales and marketing, these are terms that we've defined, but customers don't care about sales and marketing. At the end of the day, you are talking to a customer, they just want something that solves their problem. So sales and marketing is more of an internal term that we use to kind of define the activities that we do to get them across the line. Another thing that you want to pay attention to, not only in this video, is that when you are pitching your products or solutions, a lot of us tend to be in the situation where we think we are the hero, and we highlight like, oh, look, we work with X many clients and customers. You are not the hero. Your customer is the hero. You are, to put it in Star Wars analogy terms, you are Yoda. But you are guiding the hero to their end destination. You are not the hero. Your customer. Another example, if you need another way of thinking of it, is Super Mario. So those of you who game, you probably know Mario, the Italian plumber who's rescuing the princess. If you're selling a product or a service, the fire flower is the product. Customer doesn't care about the fire flower. Customer wants the fire flower so that he or she can become Super Mario, becomes invincible, can throw fireballs, right? What do you enable your customer to become by using your product? That's what they buy into. So moving past need versus want, as you are presenting your solution, one framework that you can use to help the customers see that your solution ties into their want and not only is what they need, is using this thing called the feature benefit value map. So the acronym is FBV. So that's a simple way of thinking of it. Every time you pitch a feature, you need to tie it back to what does the feature do, what's the benefit of it, and then underline the benefit, how does it address or speak to the customer's values. So for example here, if you have locally grown, organic, pesticide-free, those are features. Why do people care about it being locally grown? Right? They care about it because they want to be part of the community. Or why do they care about pesticide-free? They want it to be healthy, right? So that's the benefit. That's what they need. And then the value is the more overarching one. I want to be healthy because I want to keep my family healthy. And maybe it's about the family piece, or maybe it's because I want to be part of my community. That's why I want to buy local, right? That's why I focus on less transportation, less waste in the environment, those kind of things. So if you always tie a feature back to those benefits and the values, then that's how the customers can see how you enable them to do what they want to. So how does that look like in conversation? So here's an example going back to the photo and the camera thing. So you might say, you mentioned you like taking pictures at night. So that was just acknowledging their kind of want. And then you say, okay, this camera has a long shutter delay, allowing more light to be captured. So that's the feature that you're talking about. And then you say, okay, it enables you to take clearer pictures at night. So you have a longer shutter delay, you get clearer pictures. And then, sorry, with that, you'll never miss capturing a valuable nighttime moment. Right? So that is the want that they have. Think about how you can position them.
Do you mind going through it again, so I
Yeah.
can write down the order? The first one was, acknowledge.
Acknowledge, and then you go feature, and then benefit value.
Okay, thank you.
Again, I can share the slides, but like all of it is in book, so you can see it all on my website as well. So same thing, like one exercise that you can do when you go back is whatever you're selling or whatever interaction you have. Let's say you're speaking with a potential mentor or even a friend and you're trying to convince them to go hiking with you. I'll give you an example of that in a second. But what you do is you think, okay, what are the features? And then underlying those features, how do they benefit that person? And then from there, how does it speak to their values? When you talk about values as well, you can also share from the perspective of your company values, because often, ideally, if your company or if you set up your company in the right way and you are truly a values-driven company, then you would have created certain features because you actually care about some of those things, and they should hopefully also appeal to your customer. So, for example, let's say if you are a cybersecurity company and you care about privacy, obviously customers care about privacy as well, and you can say like, because one of our core values is privacy, we've developed this encryption feature in our product, for example. That's why, because it's part of our values, and therefore it also resonates with their values. As you give solutions, one recommendation, especially if you're in the service industry, is you don't want to just prescribe and just give them something that solves their problem. You want to dig deep enough to understand what is causing the problem. So you don't want to solve the symptom, you want to go into the root cause. Because if you just stop at the symptom there, you're like, giving them the fish, they don't learn how to fish, they won't be able to actually improve. The other challenge that you find here is, as a service provider, you will often be seen as more of a commodity if you just give them the fix. Because if they know what they want, they can go elsewhere and find another service provider that can do the same thing, right? So I'll give you an example in my context. So as a sales consultant or sales trainer, sometimes people will say like, Chin, can you just come in and help us sell our product? Like, can I hire you for like 2 months, help me get some sales, and then we'll go from there. I don't like to do that, because if I help you get some sales, yes, your revenue increase, but then if I step away, you get back into the same problem again where you have the cash flow problem. So maybe you have some issues underlying that. Maybe you're not pricing correctly. Maybe you are don't have the right infrastructure to sell a good product because you don't have training material, this and that. If you can come in and show people the blind spots, you can show them how to fish, then you become a lot more powerful as a service provider. And lastly, as you work with someone, I think this applies again more for service businesses, maybe even for tech businesses as well. You want to find ways where you can collaborate with the customer to come up with a solution together, especially if you're working with bigger clients, because in those cases, you don't want to just like send a contract and just hope they like all the terms and they'll sign off, right? So draft the proposal together, come up with an MOU. That way they feel that they're involved and they get a say in what they really want as well, in what you're delivering to them. If you're finding that maybe they're saying like, oh, we want you to do X, Y, and Z, and you actually know you don't want to do that because it's not beneficial for them, then that's where you can push back on them again as well. You can educate them. Lastly is, after you've presented your solution, now we move to the stage where you kind of move towards the close. And the close here is a scary word for a lot of people. I find that usually a lot of people are quite comfortable with the first view, where it's like building the connection, asking the questions, kind of showing the product. But when it comes to like asking for the sale, a lot of people freeze up. When it comes to closing, first thing that I want to give you is what we call the trial close. So this is how you can tell if someone's ready to buy. And the trial close, number one is, how it works is you're asking close-ended questions, and it's the only time in the conversation where instead of asking an open-ended question, you are encouraged to ask a question where you get a single word answer. So if you don't know what an open-ended versus closed-ended question is, closed-ended is basically like a yes or no answer. And if you add, let's say, a who, what, where, when, why, how in front of the question, it becomes an open-ended question. Open-ended questions good for assessing needs because they encourage people to share more. It's less like an interrogation. You're not saying like, do you do this? Do you do that? And it's yes, no, right? So you use the open-ended questions in assessment, but when it comes to closing, it's helpful to have some closed-ended questions there because it helps you identify if they're actually ready to move on to the next step. So if you say things like this, like, do you understand everything I just said? Like, do you think this is the right product for you? If they're saying yes, it's an indicator that they're ready to move on. It's not definitive. They may still need some clarification, but it helps you understand if they're ready to move on, right? Another important part here is, although ideally you want to ask questions that give you yeses, but I'm not saying that you should force people into saying a yes and try to create a situation where it's hard for them to say a no. Don't do that. Reason why is because sometimes no can actually be more beneficial for you. Because what happens is when people say yes, they feel like they're committing into something. But when they say no, they feel that they're protecting something, right? So sometimes you may ask a question that incites a no, and that is still for you an indicator that they are ready to move on to the next step. But it makes it a lot more comfortable for the person to answer the question because they don't feel like they have to commit to it. Yes, make sense? So for example, you might ask something like, is this no longer a project that's your priority, for example? And if they say no, that means that you're still interested, right? So you can move on to the next step, whatever it is. But they are comfortable saying no, like they don't have to say yes or something. If they do say no, and if they really aren't ready, it isn't the end of the road again. And generally a no is no now doesn't mean no forever. And no now doesn't mean no never. But if they do say no, you can try to understand like why are they saying no? And that's where we go into understanding objections, overcoming them. And then from there, you recommend again that once you address the objection, you can give a new solution or maybe talk about why it's not an objection if maybe it's a false belief. And then you go into trying to close again. So that's kind of the cycle. But don't think about kind of overcoming objections as like killing objections. So I think a lot of sales terms as well tends to be very emotionally charged. You're not trying to get them to, you're not trying to disprove your customer, right? You don't have to kill every single objection. Because first thing that you need to recognize is when someone has an objection, every objection is a valid objection. You need to understand why they have that objection. Sometimes it may be because they have a false belief or misconception, but that doesn't mean that they are wrong. You need to say, oh, I can see why you think that's the case. So one example is I did some photography work back before I actually moved into doing sales training. So when I work on photography or video projects, often what you get with people working with you is they don't understand, they're hesitant to give you a quote probably. And the reason why is because they think that, oh, if I give you a quote, you are going to just bill me at the highest rate possible. So that's kind of the objection that they would give, or the hesitancy around disclosing that information. And then what I would say to them is like, I understand why you think that's the case, and your belief is absolutely true because actually a lot of service providers out there, they do try to quote the highest price possible once they know their client's budget. But I don't price based on that. I price based on products. So I don't price based on hours. So I need to understand your quote because from there, it helps me understand what constraints I have and maybe I need to be creative, how I do the filming or in order to get kind of that outcome that you want in your video. So whatever false belief it may be, you need to try to uncover some of that. Typically, false beliefs are under 3 different categories. So the first one is they may have a false belief of what the means. So for example, if someone is working with you, and they might say, I don't believe natural healing is formal. I'm more scientific based. Or maybe if someone is working with nature thoughts, they might say, I don't believe in the Montessori system. Maybe I have other thoughts on how I should homeschool my children, for example. So the false belief about a means one category. So maybe they don't think that your type of solution is the right kind of solution. Second category is a false belief about themselves. So an internal false belief. Maybe I don't have the time, I don't have the money for it. And then the third one is false belief about something external. So maybe it's I'm not confident in you. I don't think that I'll actually get the kind of results met. So you need to uncover some of that so that you can address it in order to move past those objections. So C.A.R.E, you can also apply that towards addressing objections. So number one is you want to confirm and clarify, because sometimes you may think that they are pushing back on pricing, but actually pricing is not really the main cause. Maybe they think pricing, you think pricing is an issue for them, but actually it's something else. Maybe they need to confirm with the decision maker in their household, right? And then from there you need to acknowledge. So again, like I say, there's no such thing as a false objection. Every objection is valid. You need to acknowledge and understand where it's coming from. And then you respond. That's again where you go back to uncovering the false belief and kind of seeing where that comes in. And then lastly, you ensure that that's all that's holding them back. Like, are there other things that are not being addressed? Maybe other questions that they have, and you haven't addressed it yet as well. So yeah, I think I gave this example here. So are you worried that working with a consultant is too time intensive? Many people rightfully believe so, because many consultants are incentivized to drag out the project because they bill by the hour. We price based scope of work to prioritize efficiency, so that's reframed. Again, you notice here you're confirming and you're acknowledging why they believe so, you're giving them their reason. So you're not just saying that they're wrong. And then you reframe it, you say, we don't do business that way. And then you end it by saying, furthermore, our retainer fees are result oriented. So it's not just that we just focus on the project and then we don't care about the results. So again, it's addressing another potential objection that they might have made. So we're not cutting corners. We're not just trying to complete as quickly as possible. We are equally vested in the success. So then the key to being able to be effective with overcoming objections is preparing in advance. Because oftentimes answers that you come up with on the spot, even though you know what the answer should be, aren't very good answers. So start to think now, like, what do people usually push back on, and how might you respond to some of those? This is probably the most powerful thing. Like, if you can address an objection before it even comes up, then it no longer becomes an objection. Right? So if you know what objections are often brought up by your customers, if let's say people often doubt the quality of your product, or if they often doubt that it's too cheap to be true kind of thing to be good, then if you bring it up in conversation earlier along, you say like, we're able to price so low because we do X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. If you explain it well, then it won't become an objection later on. So closing then, so assuming everything's fine, now they're ready to, there's no more objections, they're ready to close. How do you close? I don't want to go so much into the techniques of closing. There's a lot. You can just Google search like closing techniques. They have like assumptive close or the alternate choice close, like you want A or B. Too many techniques. At the end of the day, the main thing that you want to think about is when you are in this interaction with someone, if you have the solution to the problem, if you don't offer to give it to them, you don't close, it's kind of like if you go to someone's birthday party, you bring this amazing gift and you're like, hey, so cool. You show everyone how it's going to change their life and how amazing it is. And then you walk out the door and you go home, right? So don't expect customers to have to ask for the sale, because it is in your hands. It's your responsibility to give it. So you shouldn't have to get your customers to say, okay, I want to buy it. You need to be able to offer it, right? In closing, some things that I want to point out that you need to be mindful about is in a lot of like marketing techniques, tricks, they talk about like urgency. When you use urgency, yes, it does help prompt people to a decision, but you want to be careful about using the right kind of urgency. So inauthentic urgency is like the kind of stuff where like sometimes I don't know if you see it here much in Whitehorse, but in Vancouver, like I'll drive by this furniture store and it's always on sale. And the worst thing is it's not just regular sale, it's like going out of business sale. And like a year later, it's still going out of business sale. And it never got out of business. Like, why did they put that out there? So if you use this kind of false things, people come to expect like that, like you're always on sale. they have a different expectation going in and out of their conversation, and kind of creates a wrong impression of them, right?
Nobody like to pay full price, so.
Yeah. So sales is one. Another one I don't really like is early bird pricing as well. Like if you have events, early bird pricing makes sense and it's okay if there's value that you're giving to someone for signing up early. For example, like let's say if you have a course and you have a start date and you need to purchase certain things before the start date of the course so that you can create the material for your participants, then yes, you can have an early date, like a sign up date. And if people sign up by then, they can get a discount because you can get a earlier order, for example, then that's a legitimate reason for them to sign up early. But if you have those like fake dates that you see a lot of courses online, it's a webinar, it's like a not even a live program, and they have a like sign up by this day. Like, what's the point of that? Instead, like authentic urgency, like if you can show people why there's a good reason for them to sign up early, maybe it's seating arrangement. Like you sign up early, you get preferred seating. Say must use this. Another thing to think about when you think about urgency is not only the external urgency. So the external piece is that what you care about, like you have a certain date. So those are the external drivers. Internal urgency is what they care about. So internal urgency I find is often a lot more powerful. So if you can, again, it's not going to be possible in every case, but if you can, you want to try to address the internal. So the external pieces are like, discount, pricing, dates. They're like, I need to sign up before, or else I won't get the discount. Those are external factors. Internal is like, for example, let's say when we work with entrepreneurs that need to raise money from investors. What I find is a lot of people don't realize that to raise money from investors, it doesn't usually take 3 months. It usually takes a whole year because you need to work with a legal company, get the documents in order. You need to build relationships with an investor before you can actually get them on board. So if they don't understand the fundraising process before then, and they just come to me like, oh, I need to raise money by January, like, I'm going to take your course now. So if I just say like, oh, we have a course, our course start date is this date, that urgency piece is external, and that is not as effective. But if I communicate to them like, oh, you want to raise money by this date, in order to do that, you need to understand why it takes as long as it does. And I speak to that timeline that they care about, then it's a lot more powerful when it comes to getting them to sign up now, rather than just focusing on the start date of the course. Yeah, so these are promotions. Internal. So again, this goes back to if you've done a good job quantifying value when you do the assessment, right? That's why I say you want to figure out what they want to accomplish, and ideally by when as well. And you can say, oh, you wanted to do this by this date, therefore you need to start by this date because blah 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 blah. Next one. So assuming you've closed your customer now, they've bought into your product or service, we are now moving into kind of the next step beyond. And I think what often falls through the cracks here is setting good expectations. So the acronym in the book is CARE. So connect, assess, respond, engage. There's actually another E that I didn't put in there, which is expectations. It's just as important, but it just makes the acronym a bit ugly. But expectations is so important because if you look at every bad customer experience that you have had, it all stems from expectations. Always, I guarantee you this. And how I realized this, very stupid story, but back when the first Transformers movies came out, I had no idea what it was going to be. And I was like, okay, how good could it be? It's a silly cartoon about like transforming cars and vehicles. How could they make it look cool? So my friend brought me for it, and then 2.5 hours later, I was like, whoa, like it was cool. And the story was decent. That is not the best movie out there. But because I actually had negative expectation going in, and what was delivered, the actual reality was above what I expected, I had a good experience. And what I realized then after that is you get the same thing. Like every bad customer experience you have, every good one, it all boils down to this. If you have low expectation and you exceed that, they're happy. If you have high expectation and you under-deliver, they're disappointed. So when I used to work for Bell, and you probably see this with not Northwest as well, because they are only Bell. Bell brags about how great their coverage is. And I often found that when I was with Bell, I get a lot of angry customers coming like saying I was skiing here, I was camping here, I was working, off the grid here, and I have no reception, and they get all pissed off and they get roaming charges and all that kind of stuff. And then when I worked for Freedom a while back when they were Win, we actually saw this like when we joined as sales reps. I thought it was a weakness because we would only work in like the major cities. Like it only works in Toronto and Vancouver. I don't think it works anywhere up here in Whitehorse. And when I spoke to customers, I was like, like people are not going to want to buy us because we have such small coverage. But then in training, we were taught to really do a good job assessing and understanding like where do they use the phone, how do they use the phone, and not only that, actually educating the customer and setting those expectations. Like if you go into these areas, it won't work. Here's how roaming works. Here's how to turn off roaming. Here's how to make an emergency call if you don't have reception. And by actually setting those good expectations, we actually had a lot less complaining customers than bigger companies thought. So just by doing the expectation setting, that really, really helps with customer service. Not only that, take it a step further, and when you think about building magical experiences for your customers, this goes back to even the design of your product offering itself. Same thing, like what do people expect your solution or your level of service to be? If you are just delivering on what they expect, that is just the norm, right? You are not creating a magical moment for them. You need to be able to think about how can you exceed that. So let's say, for example, you run C.A.R.E, and if you just have people check in, check out, everything is clean, that's not going to give you a 5-star review. That's just the norm. So if you are able to wow them because maybe you did a bit of research before they came, you know that they like to ski, you gave them, you put a subsidy that they can use, and maybe was a lesson pass for them for, a small maybe token, then that is going to give them the wow experience. Like, oh, this person really cares about me. So again, not everything is going to be possible, but think about in your situation, how can you go above and beyond, and be very intentional with it. Because don't expect those magical moments to happen by accident. And if you ever visit like Disneyland, you can see how they engineer and design, or what do you call it? They have a special term for it, but basically in QA, like everything is there for a reason, right? There's interactive screens to distract you from waiting in line. They show you like, oh, wait time 120 minutes, but maybe it's only half an hour, and then you're like, oh, the line's gonna be faster than I thought. Or there's going to be like mascots coming in doing performances. So you're always like entertained, and it's not a bad experience. And if you do it right, you can actually turn complaints into advocates. And one personal example, I don't know if I have it here. But when I bought, so I have a boat called a packraft. I don't know if any of you know what that is. A packraft is basically like an inflatable kayak, but more durable and a lot lighter. And I bought mine because I wanted to go camping, I wanted to go on rivers. And when I bought it, it came and there was a puncture in it. So the boat I bought was supposed to be like a dual chamber boat. There's like 2 sections, front and back. And there was a puncture in between. So basically it became a single chamber boat. So on the under-promising side, be careful, like key features, you don't want to hide those. Like those need to be upfront. Like if you have added value, like extra things that you throw in, then yes, those you can intentionally leave out and then wow them with those. So yeah, this is the exercise again, quite simply put, like you just want to define like what are some of those touch points in their interaction with you. Maybe it's like how you initially deliver your product. Maybe it's how you deal with a customer complaint, and how can you, like what is the base expectation? How can you exceed it? So I want to show you quickly like how C.A.R.E actually goes in the customer journey, and that it can actually be applied not only in like a single interaction and not only in person, but also everywhere else. So for example, if you say, if you're a B2B, you're doing cold calling, right? That connect might be the initial introduction. Maybe it's that outreach email that you're sending them. Even if you look within the email itself, like that's the subject line, that's how you connect with someone, right? The assessment is maybe your discovery call with them, your interview. Your recommendation is your demo or your trial. And then the closing is the proposal or the pilot project, whatever you have. If you're building a website, like above the fold, what do you need to communicate before people even scroll to the bottom? That's why you often see a lot of big companies, they have like testimonials on the website, the companies we work with. That's exactly why, because they need to build trust early and they need to be like, maybe it's a survey or a quiz that someone fills out, right? And then you fill out the survey, you get maybe a template or a guide or tool or whatever it is. And that's how you assess them. And then your recommendation, that's your product page, obviously. And then your engage might be your call to action, what call to actions you use, your FAQ sections, your checkout process, confirmation emails, drip campaigns, those kind of. If you're retail, that's your storefront. So that's how people actually see you and get that first impression. Your store layout, right? What do you do to greet them when you come in? And then assessment is the questions you ask, and then recommendation is your demonstration, your samples that you give them, and then engagement is your checkout process. Maybe do you set up the device for them? Do you walk them through the service? Whatever. Even within, let's say, individual elements, like in the email, you notice like you're trying to build a connection early on. So that's the subject line and like the first sentence or first paragraph. Assessment is you might be explaining how you got to know them, why you're reaching out to them. And then recommendation is, what's in it for them? Why should they care to continue the conversation with you? Maybe you're not even pitching your product here yet. And then your engagement is how you make that ask in email. Every email should have an ask. You don't just say, here's what I do and what have you. So I'll show you one example in email. And this is part of, email is falls under the category of marketing, more copywriting rather than sales. But basically, you can see here, here I sent this email, and this was for a fundraising training program that we had when I was at the social venture. So we would have a program that would help people understand how to raise money from impact investors. So in the subject line, I say, I found your company on Gus. So number one, I'm personalizing. So this makes it relevant for them. So this is the kind of builds the common ground piece. And then I show them where I found them. Gus is a platform where people create a profile so that investors can find them and where they can find investors as well. So this is part of the assess, right? It shows that I've done my research, that I know that they might be interested in what I'm showing them because I found them on this platform. And then say, okay, hey Janet, again, it's a connection, it's personalized, that's building the rapport there. First sentence I can probably take out, like, great to meet you, I hope you're doing well. I came across Teen Job Find, so that's the company name on Gus. I believe we have aligned values to use business as a force for good. So how did I know that they were a social venture? It's actually because when I was building this list, I actually found, I was looking at the B Corporation list, B Corp. So it's a certification that you can get if you are do good business. And I say, I would like to hear more about your impact-driven venture. What's wondering? So this is the assessment. Are you currently raising a round of funding or planning to in the next 6 months? So yes, although I found them on Gus, I want to know if they're still actively raising money. And then I say, so this is where I present. So I say, Spring specializes in providing training, coaching, and mentorship on fundraising. Let me know if you're raising. So that's the engagement piece. That's my ask. I'm not giving them the solution right away. Again, like, you don't sell in a single interaction. Here, I'm just trying to qualify them. Let me know if you're raising and we can be deeper or I can show you how we can help. So I'm just asking for permission to continue that conversation. So my second email to her would be something along the lines of like, let's try to find a time. Let me try to figure out if you actually need our help. So that's where you might actually move more into like the actual conversation when you book the meeting with them and actually have more of a bigger pitch and presentation. But it doesn't all have to happen in one single interaction. So yeah, I mean, examples on the website on books, so don't worry about writing into that. But the idea here is you can use it not only in conversation, but you can even use it in emails on your website, and not all of it has to be pitching a product. So I talked about this one when I talked about addressing complaints. So you can also use a framework in a similar way. Like when you think about care, like when someone's complaining to you, the first step is you need to show them that yes, you can solve their problem. So that's I am the right person to speak to because I have the technical knowledge. You can trust me. I will do my best to solve your problem. Assess, right? You want to address the root cause of the problem. The big one here, as an example, is my wife. she works for a bank and she works in banking. And sometimes she will complain to me about bad customers that she has on call. And me being the consultant that I am, I tend to problem solve. And sometimes I don't realize that I just need to take a step back and realize that she just wants to vent at me. She doesn't want a solution. She just wants me to listen so that she can get me to agree that yes, that was a shitty customer. I don't need to solve her problem. She knows how to solve the problem. So like sometimes customers, they just want to complain. And you being there and listening to them and not solving a problem is actually okay as well. And then when you acknowledge, so I go into a lot of other stuff as well about like how to apologize, what's the right way to apologize. But basically there is when you recommend, you want to show them that yes, your solution is actually going to solve the problem they have, or actually if they have this problem because they don't understand your solution correctly, how you need to reset the expectation. And then obviously if you can exceed the expectation again, then that's where you can turn a complaint into a good experience. So yeah, we covered a lot, but here's my email. You can go to my website and the book, the digital book is also on the website. You can link to it through there. And if you're here in person, just grab a copy as well. I'll leave it for questions. Personally, I like the website better because it's interactive. Like the videos all are like some videos I put on the website, I can't put in the book. But if you just like a physical book to me, yeah.
So if I take a step back, the CARE method can be applied in many other situations, not just sales. Like it's also a tool guide for any conversation you may have, just networking with somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not just limited to sales, like there is definitely
Yeah.
figure.
You know, if I apply, let's say, I talked about an example of bringing someone hiking, right? So if you, let's say, how do you typically invite a friend to go hiking? What would you say?
I'm personally a hiker and most of my friends are as well. So it's like, I want to go do a summit this weekend.
Yeah. So that is a more like a straightforward pitch.
Yeah.
It's just like, hey, do you want to go here? And if I'm trying to think about like care in that example, I might say something like, what are your plans, you know, this coming Saturday? Like, so that's the kind of assessment. Maybe it's a friend, so probably I don't care so much for the C piece. And then when I come to recommendation and kind of presenting it, I might say like, oh, me and Amy and Brian are going up to Mount Seaman this coming weekend. So social proof. And I might say, I'll drive, I'll plan everything, I'll pack lunch, interesting objection. And then I might say, there's only one more spot left in my car, so let me know before Friday. So I might, you know, give some form of urgency so that they it's real urgency. Like you have to let me know by Friday, or else I'm going to get someone else to take the seat. Yeah. So if you communicate that way, it becomes a lot more appealing than someone will go, okay, I want to go here for it. I don't have to plan, I don't have to drive.
And by extension, what are good situations to try the CARE method? For people, for somebody that would like to try it out, do you have good basic example for specific individual to practice?
At the end of the day, you want to obviously do what is relevant for you. So use your own business as an example. The best thing to do is just role play. So they do talk about role play a lot in sales, and it is helpful. It feels a bit uncomfortable sometimes, but when you role play, it's a safe setting where you can make the mistakes. You don't have to worry about customers critiquing you.
Thank you.
Any final questions? Heard so much, Chin. Thank you so much for being with us today. We've been counting down to your workshop for a while. It really made me think of so much of what we talk about at Innovation and Entrepreneurship about you know, taking away the word business owner or entrepreneur for a minute and just being people and humans and being our vulnerable selves and taking risks. So you definitely got me thinking about so much. Thank you for generously sharing your knowledge and time, your books.
And if anyone wants to book one-on-one time, that's the hours as well.
Absolutely. So I think we put that in the chat in case there's anyone in the territory who can make it. And otherwise, just thank you to all of you for coming. And of course, thanks to the Whitehorse Chamber, to TechYukon, BGC and Kilrich for making all of this happen.
So I've only covered like kind of the tip of the iceberg. If you go into the book, I talk about things like pricing as well, how to come up with a sales strategy, how do you optimize your revenue, like how do you get people to buy more frequently, buy more often without being like manipulative or easy.